is Dr. Alex Meredith, and I am the Director of Student Engagement here within the College of Agriculture, Science, and Technology at Delaware State University. As you guys know, Mrs. Darden is actually retiring. And it's so, I don't know, bittersweet, but it's not my life. But we've worked together for 16 years, and she's been at Del State for 20 years. I just wanted to definitely say thank you to her because when, especially the scholarship program started, it would not have started without her. Let's be very clear. The pandemic had happened. Everybody dropped the ball. Other 1890s land grants were picking up their ball and getting their scholars in the door. I want to say we were like the last ones to get them in the door. And it was her that got me together as well as the associate deans and said, we need to get this money to these kids. Miss Darden, yeah. And not only just doing that, every semester she has been willing to give her gift as well as her craft to you guys in the form of effective communication. So we've done all different types of effective communication. And so at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that we leave you with something that deals with professional settings, right? Throughout my time working with students in general at Del State, communication has always come up. And for me, being a professional, I've always felt like it was a big issue, especially the writing component. And I'm also speaking from being a Del State student. So I knew how my writing had to grow and strengthen as well. And so, like I said, I'm thankful that you were able to tap into what the students' needs were each semester and definitely get things moving. So without further ado, we're going to go into effective communication. Of course, we always co-present just to have a good time. I'm going to start off doing the what, when, where, why, talk a little bit about effective communication. Then Miss Darden, she's going to come on. She's going to present her information that she found, as well as give her expertise from a communications background. And then I'm going to come back on and I'm going to do just the same. Effective communication in professional settings. I know one year we had talked about, I think it was with emotional intelligence when we had the whole discussion and debate about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock in the face and how it actually was a professional setting. And was he really reading the room or not? And so these types of things are extremely important to employers. They point them out all the time. I know I was on a call doing judging with high school students. I think it was DECA, and the lady that was judging with me, she was dealing with she's from JP Morgan, and she was just talking to me about more effective ways of engaging onboarding students that then become professionals in a sense of being able to make just and moral and ethical decisions. So it is definitely a thing. Workplace communication is the process of exchanging information, both verbal and nonverbal, within an organization. There are many means to communication. To be an effective and a valuable member of your workplace, you must become skilled in all the different methods of communication that are definitely appropriate. Effective workplace communication ensures that organizational objectives are achieved. Workplace communication is tremendously important to organizations because it increases productivity and efficiency. And ineffective workplace communication leads to communication pages between employees, which causes confusion, waste time, as well as reduces productivity. And even at the level that college students are at right now, you guys have been in enough working spaces, whether it is retail or even if you've helped out in somebody's vet clinic, that you can definitely see effective communication versus non-effective communication. You can see that with people that come and go as far as retention. You can see that through when people are fired. You can see that, I think Azure, you made this public knowledge last time. So when you see two coworkers arguing and fighting, so communication really does mean a lot. And if you are trying to get to a place in life that you want to be a really a strong leader, and not just a strong leader, but a respected leader, you're going to have to learn all those modes of communication, right? Because something that you do can throw somebody else off or key them to think something negative and or even positive that you might not even know that you're throwing off, whether it's body language, anything. I mean, so those things, once you learn them, it's easier to put them into effect. And so like my mentor says, Dr. Kenra Jefferson Moore, Yeah, everything's easy once you learn it. So why is effective communication important? Workplace communication improves, like we said, productivity. Workplace communication can increase employee job satisfaction. Workplace communication can have a positive effect on absenteeism and as well turnover rate. How to communicate in the workplace. Communication in the workplace should occur in a way that responds positively to individual differences. And so you want to consider the following: value all individuals and treat them with respect, courtesy, and sensitivity. Recognize cultural differences. Communicate in a way to develop and maintain positive relationships, trust, and confidence. And last but not least, make an effort to use basic strategies to overcome communication barriers. Can I give one more example? Yeah, I am. For something that just happened. There's a colleague, there's a facility in our college that should be open, right? It's a public facility. And I actually had a coworker from up campus wanted to bring their students down to see this facility, right? And so the individual that's supposed to make it open and public and supposed to be nice and warm and welcoming was everything other than that, to where it was kind of pretty much like a nightmare. And this wasn't the first time that this person has actually worked with this facility. They've worked with this facility, well, if I've been here 16, at least for the last 18 years. And so long story short, when we were having the discussion, my resolve to her is like, if I'm an educator, which I am by heart, by trade first, I'm thinking about my students, right? So if I know that I'm not able to get along with you and trying to get into this facility on behalf of my students, I would rather know it now than to be trying to embark on it next January, thinking that I'm going to be able to get in February. And so my thing to her was, have an effective communication with her. Just ask her straight up. Is there an issue? Is there a safety issue? Is there a reason why Del State students aren't welcome into this public facility? Have I offended you? And so, like I said, that gets the conversation going, and it definitely helps that other person do some self-reflection and self-awareness on what they're giving out. And if nothing more, at least I know that I'm not going to put up with that next year, and I'll find another facility for my students to also um, embark on and have just as good of a time and as far as learning. So how to communicate in the workplace? Don't. It's like, no, I'm joking. Uh, hold on. How to communicate in the workplace? I wonder what happened. Well, I guess I'll go back. All right. So the way you communicate impacts your ability to get along with people and as well as to be able to get things that you want and that you need done. Communication, whether verbal, written, or visual, can be expressed in a positive and negative ways. Individuals need to take feedback from how others interpret or perceive how they are communicating. And sometimes we can be perceived as aggressive, even though it is not intended. And so those things really do matter. In my last example, I'll give, and I'm turning it over to Miss Darden. That same conversation that I had with that individual about how to communicate, we were both frustrated. And I can't lie, I actually started to swear. And so, so while we were talking, you know, we both kept on talking, and it reminded me. She was like, "Oh, well, I've known you since you were." I was like, "I know you've known me since I was 14," and I was like, "I'm 41 now." And so when I left, it bothered me. It bothered me that I knew her as a teenager and even as a 41-year-old, no matter how frustrated I might be with X, Y, and Z, that I would actually cuss around her, right? Because in my mindset, like who I am as a kid and whoever is my elder, they're always gonna be my elder. I don't care if I become their age or not, and they're still 20 years ahead of me. And so, and that's just called respect. And so it bothered me that night. And then I was like, well, I'll see her again. And I was like, nah, you got her number on your phone. And I called her yesterday. And I just told her, I was like, the conversation was real that we had yesterday. And I just wanted to let you know I apologize because I've never disrespected you like that before. I've never cussed around you. And she was like, oh no, we were two consenting adults having a good conversation about frustration with employment and blah, blah, blah. I was like, nah. I said, it still doesn't sit well with me. I was like, because I come from a place in a time like if I have a niece and a nephew that gets to being an adult, I still expect them to act like, in a respectful manner and still call me uncle. Like we're never going to be friends or peers. You know what I'm saying? Like no. So that's just another example. And she said that back to me. She was like, "That was a class act. I thank you for respecting me." So sometimes those things definitely do come into play. Ms. Darden, you ready?
I am. I'm going to try this out. So again, I've never shared PowerPoint from the cloud. So let's see how this works.
It'll work.
Is it? Yes, we're going to claim that. Okay, and then show. Then it takes over my whole screen and I can't see anyone. So hopefully everyone's still engaged. Yes, good morning. I'm Mrs. Darden. I have been the information coordinator. And sorry for my gravelly voice. Hopefully everyone can hear me. But, I have allergies and sinus issues, so just bear with me. If ever you can't hear me, someone, come on mic or whatever, let me know there's an issue, okay? Because I honestly can't see anyone now. So a lot of what Dr. Meredith said resonated with me because a lot of what he said is going to be reflected in what I share with you. Okay. So he was just mentioned something about protocol, especially when dealing with your elders. I had a situation quite recently where one of my nieces was handing the phone to, I think, my father and said, "Oh," and she called me by my first name, "is on the phone." And I said, "That's Auntie to you." So just acknowledge a sense of agency. I'm defining what agency is. You've probably heard this term, batted about quite a bit in current discourse. So agency is your feeling of control over your actions, your feelings, and your actions, right? And so Dr. Meredith was sharing with you the ways in which you have to introspectively walk through the world, be mindful about who you are and how you're presenting yourself. In past presentations, we've talked about personal branding. Everything you do represents your personal brand. It's how you intentionally show up in the world. And you're the person who defines what that should look like. But remember, there are consequences to everything you do in life, either good or bad. Just be aware that you can potentially impact something or someone in either a positive or a negative way. And that is your power, that is your agency. So part of understanding your agency is knowing your worth. You have value. Know what that value is, especially if you're presented with a job offer or you're before a grad committee and they're deciding whether or not to admit you to a graduate program. Know who you are and the values you possess. They're looking at you for a reason. Otherwise, they would not have even reached out to you. You wouldn't have gotten an interview. So understand you have worth. Be self-disciplined. Again, the way you present yourself is your personal brand. Understand how you should engage with other people, right? So think about, again, being introspective. And this is one strategy I do daily. So before I leave my house, I think about, okay, I have to have meetings with these people. I have to do this here. I have to work with someone interpersonally. So I strategize what my movements are going to be, how I'm going to phrase whatever discussions or ideation sessions we're going to have. So I do a lot of that introspection before I even get to the point of engaging with other people. Build a village around you. And you've probably heard this in different respects, but understand how you want to present yourself. Again, your personal branding. Then reach out to like-minded people when you're developing your village. Sometimes there's an adage that I use, and I had to use painfully, or come to that awareness painfully in 2011. I had a longtime friend. She was like a sister to me. She had, what was it, 10 or 11 godchildren, but I so wanted her to be my son's godmother, and I just wouldn't dare put another child on her. So I didn't ask her. Later, I found out she was offended I didn't ask, but digressing. But I had to remove her from my village for something she did that was so disrespectful. And the adage I use is people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So you, again, going through introspection, identifying your agency, knowing who you are capable then of building around you. And later in life, if you decide to have a family, raise a family, building around your family, people who are going to be supportive, encouraging. I'm sorry. Oh, someone came. Okay. People who are going to be encouraging, supportive, but don't just take. Make sure you also give. Okay. So make sure the village you develop is one that you can engage with fully. So there's a give and a take. Set clear expectations about who you are and what you are willing to do, especially on a job. Set boundaries. I'm a person of faith. So one of my boundaries is on Sundays, I'm engaged in my faith practice. And so I'm not available for work. So there are times when you will have to do that for yourself and part of knowing your agency is being courageous and confident enough to make that known. Okay. And set that out early on in your relationship with whomever. And that's key and critical when you're developing the relationship. And then finally, protect your peace. There are times when you're going to need to disengage just to regroup. That's something that I also do. So I'm considered an introvert. It doesn't mean I'm shy. It means that there are times when I need to recharge my energy. And I derive all of that from internal sources as opposed to external sources. So protect your peace. Okay, someone is not muted. Written communication. This is something that is key. So communication, period, is foundational to developing solid relationships. Just think about the relationships you have in life with parents, with siblings if you have them, other family members, friends, teachers, professors, employers, if you're already working a job. Just think about those relationships. And fundamentally, those relationships are built upon communication, right? So when we talk about written communication, it's very important that we are clear, we are concise, especially these days, because nobody has time to read a whole lot of stuff. But you want to make sure that whatever your messaging is, it is clearly related, it's relevant, timely, and it's accurate. So that means you got to use what is the grammar tool that people use online? Grammarly or something like. So exercise caution when you're putting out written communication. Make sure that it clearly reflects your messaging and who you are. Okay. And this is something you can take away with you. This is just kind of popped in my head this morning. Often you will show up on paper before you show up in person. Think about the emails you've sent to people, maybe introducing yourself. Think about if you've ever sent out a resume, if you've ever completed a job application online. Think about those moments where you've had to set yourself, you've had to represent yourself in writing before the other person ever laid eyes on you, if they did at all. So it's critical to remember that you are branding yourself with everything you do, and writing is a big component of that. And here's a statistic here: 75% of adults agree that email and online tools like what we're doing now, video conferencing, some of the other communication apps that people use, social media, all of that is preferred now to talking on the phone or meeting in person. So writing is an essential tool and skill to have. The workplace is always a professional environment, and Dr. Meredith stressed that as well. Okay. And I've got examples where that's not always been respected. So any form of written communication should reflect who you are as a professional, and it should meet the professional standards of whatever organization or university you attend next. Universal expectations for written communication include, again, being concise, being clear, simple, and easy to understand, to the point. So you're not rambling. And I've seen some of that. One of the examples I used to use was a lot of the writing I would see from cooperative extension professionals over the years. Okay, so I've spent 20 years here. I had, a previous life that included working for Lincoln University in Missouri, which is another 1890 land grant. And my job there, as it is here, was to decipher some of the writing from the professionals working in their outreach programs. And I would cut down. There's one woman in particular whose prose was always so flowery, and she took her time getting to the point. And so she would develop these 8-page newsletters that I would whittle down to 4 pages. I said, you don't need all that. You need to get the messaging out. It needs to be clear. It needs to be to the point. And I wish I had pulled up the current statistic, but there is a large swath of adults in America who cannot read above a 6th grade level. So again, being clear, making sure you know your audience, making sure that your writing is understandable. Don't use a lot of jargon and a lot of words that, are just taking up space. Practice word economy when you're writing. Don't be too technical. Again, that goes to jargon. And in some instances, especially if you become employed by a government agency, you'll run into a lot of acronyms. So there are a lot of agencies that do a lot of things, and they have these long names for whatever projects or programs they're instituting, and they condense all of that down to an acronym, right? So just be careful when you're writing in those instances that your writing isn't too heavy on jargon, especially if some of the people in your audience are outside your organization. Let's see. Don't use, okay, yeah. So Dr. Meredith gave an example of speaking to a colleague, and he used some language that he regretted using. And it's so good that he did that introspection, and it didn't sit well with him. So he took appropriate steps to make sure it felt right with him after, and that he made the apology to the other party to that conversation. And certainly don't use any language that's offensive, discriminatory, racist, or sexist. So we just have to think, and especially, you're budding professionals here. So a lot of this should be old news to you. The whole idea of getting a higher education is that we're going through a mind expansion, right? You're broadening your mind, broadening your scope of understanding. So a lot of this should fall by the wayside anyway, just by matter of course. And I know these bullets are kind of out of, don't worry about it. But demonstrating empathy, and that's part of what I just discussed. Being mindful, right? Examine your speaking style. I'm seeing notes come across. Are you trying to communicate with me?
Apologies.
Okay.
I'm just monitoring the chat.
Okay, great. All right. Again, when we're talking about communicating verbally, just like in writing, you want to be clear. So you speak clearly, you listen carefully to make sure that you are receiving the message. Because if your boss, if someone in your grad program is providing you with essential information, you need to then be able to comprehend the message and then act accordingly, right? And what was I going to say? There was something I was going to add here. Oh, so this is something that I use with young people at my church because I'm involved in Christian ed at church. So we are provided with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Think about the ratio. We're supposed to do twice as much listening as we do speaking. And if more of us practice that, there'd be less conflict in the world. Ask questions and confirm the meaning of information to avoid misunderstanding. Again, if you understand your agency, you're walking confidently, courageously, ask questions. It's important because down the line, your boss or whomever may expect you now to present whatever you needed to provide, whatever you needed to produce based on whatever it was they said before. And if you didn't fully understand and you didn't ask questions, how are you going to properly execute? Let others talk. A conversation is a dialogue. Sometimes I have conversations with myself, but it's whatever. I like speaking to intelligent people. So a conversation is a dialogue, not a monologue. And you know the difference, right? Between a dialogue and a monologue. Engage in difficult conversations when necessary. Dr. Meredith's example comes to mind here again. Not saying something to avoid a difficult conversation usually makes things worse. Okay. And sometimes, those feelings and emotions will start to rise to the top, and then there are consequences for that, and not necessarily good. Ensure the tone you use is open and non-confrontational, and always encourage feedback. Always encourage people to give you feedback, give other people constructive feedback. And we'll talk in a second about how that feedback should look, right? When you're communicating with external audiences, again, you represent a brand. So not only your personal brand, but also whatever organization, company, agency you're representing. It's important to communicate appropriately with clients and customers. And I know if you're anything like me, since the COVID shutdown, I've become one of the YouTube viewers. I never really watched a lot of YouTube prior to the COVID shutdown, but some of the videos I see, yeah. So look at some of that and say, okay, this is what not to do when you're dealing with clients and customers. Miscommunication can occur in many ways and create significant problems in the workplace. Words matter. Think about, again, the introspection piece. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. You don't want anyone to misinterpret what you've said. You want to make sure that you're communicating clearly. And again, that's where feedback is important, because you ask to make sure the other person understands. And your body language. So you may be saying one thing and in any other setting would seem positive, but if you're not smiling, if you're not providing eye contact, you're looking down or away, or, maybe you've got some different expression on your face that typically a human being would translate as, oh, this person doesn't want to be bothered with me. So just make sure that your body language matches your messaging. They are not listening to you properly, or you are not listening to them properly. So again, think about representing your brand. Think about how it's important to do more listening than talking so that you can understand and ask questions for clarity, for clarification. And then here's some tips. Again, speak clearly. Don't be judgmental. Be open. Be respectful of stakeholders' feelings. Use the customer's name. That's something I do a lot, even as the customer. So if I miss the person's name, if I'm on the phone with a customer service representative, I'll often ask at the end, I'm sorry, what was your name again? And then I proceed to say, well, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate your help. And that goes a long way to creating, a good rapport between you and that business. Because oftentimes, what do you hear when you get on the phone with customer service? This call is being recorded for training purposes, right? So you're being monitored. Let's see, use the customer's name, unlearn your bad habits, be aware of nonverbal messages. Again, the body language. Be genuinely interested in people and ask questions and be open to feedback. So we covered quite a bit of that. So one thing we mentioned earlier was conflict management. Dr. Meredith had his examples. I have a recent example with, my phone carrier, and I wasn't getting the satisfaction that I thought I deserved, longtime loyal customer, and I was getting the runaround. So I made sure I escalated. Now I wasn't didn't present myself, my brand in a way that was untoward or a way that would probably be put in my file as a customer that, had issues. But I was able then to communicate with corporate for that company. And the outcome was exactly what I needed. So I got everything I needed, got everything resolved, handled properly, handled efficiently, and I spent quite a while on the line with the person from corporate as they went through in real time to solve my problem. And I was very gracious. I could have been upset because I, got the runaround from people, below his level, but I didn't do that. Why would I do that? Why would I expend that energy? Not necessary. So save the drama for your mama, okay? Address issues immediately and openly and set clear expectations. We've talked about that. One other thing that I can remember, an instance where young ladies were arguing outside my window on campus. So I'm inside trying to do my work. All of a sudden, the sound starts to escalate, and I realize what's coming next is probably some blows, some physical contact. So I jumped up from my office, went outside, and I diffused the situation immediately. And I explained to the young ladies that this is a professional setting. There's a certain way that you should carry yourselves. Plus, there's a different way to resolve this issue. You don't have to jump on anyone. Take it to court. Take it to court. Use the resources that as a professional, you should know you have. So take advantage of those resources. And they appreciated it because what I told them would invariably happen, that someone would call the police, did happen. Someone called the police. So avoid situations that will cause you then to have issues, okay? That will put you in some kind of negative light. Mutual respect, use I language. Okay, I was checking the time because I saw Dr. Matthews come back on the screen. Make sure that you maintain mutual respect. Use I language. Establish boundaries. I'm going to get to I language in a second. Consider hierarchical positioning. So understand your role within the organization, the agency, the business, as a student. So if you're going on to grad school, you're still considered a student. And so you're not at the level of a professor or a dean or the president of the university. Yes, you should be able to confer. You should be able to have conversations, reach out, ask questions, all of that. Just handle it respectfully, right? So understand your role, understand protocol. Wherever you work, there's going to be an employee manual. Wherever you work, There will be guardrails provided to you so you understand, how to work within those boundaries. That's important. So I language, I just wanted to show you, and hopefully you can see this. Okay. This is I messaging, and some of you may have done this. I learned this in high school. I'm not going to tell you what year, and don't ask. Uh, but I messaging requires you, again, being introspective and looking at how you are presenting yourself in a conflict situation. And so you use I messaging. So you center yourself, you discuss what you're feeling or what you're thinking, and then what kind of resolution you're hoping for. Okay. So I'm just scanning through this. We're not going to cover all of this, but I wanted to get to this page because this is a template for developing some I messaging. When you, whatever the action is, whatever it sets you off, I feel, and the feeling should be an actual feeling. And you see below here, we're talking about an actual feeling. So if you say, I feel like, that's no longer a feeling. That's I think, right? A feeling is an emotion. I feel angry. I feel hurt. I feel scared. So those are feelings. So be very clear, right? And intentional. I feel or I think because this is why I feel or think this. And I would prefer that, right? And so here are some examples down here. So these are examples of what this is something you wouldn't say if you're centering yourself. You never listen to anyone and you're not really listening to me now. On the converse, I feel that my concerns are not being heard. So there's always a way to temper your communication, your message, so that it is well received. Okay, let's see. Get back here and let's see.
So thank you, Mrs. Darden, definitely for the information as well as useful examples. Something that just hit me that I read not too long ago. Does anybody know what gaslighting is?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
what is gaslighting? Because I can't see you.
Gaslighting isn't it like passive, like saying things that like trigger people.
So it can
Saying or
trigger
doing things
you.
that trigger people.
Does anybody else have an example as well? Liam? It's a form of manipulation. Yes, it is a form of manipulation. If you throw manipulation in there, you might as well say it's a form of control. And it gets on my nerves because it's so prominent these days. One example I can give is, I had a colleague that was supposed to come on and teach you guys about personal finance for college students because that's their background. And so I had set a date for us to get together at least a week or two beforehand, before we went on. And something happened to where it didn't ding on my side as far as a reminder. And time came up and we were about maybe 5 days out. And so I hit them up. I was like, are we still going to be doing this? And I got excuses. And my thing is like, if you don't want to do something, just say you don't want to do something from the beginning. And so they were like, oh yeah, check in with me next semester because I really need to get better at my public speaking. And so they're still a good friend and colleague. I just know not to depend on them for certain things and what to go to them for and what not to. And I had come across, and if anybody wants it, I can find it again, but they have perfect prompts that you say to people that are gaslighting you in different situations. So I think that that's really cool because you're going to really find that a lot in graduate school with new advisors who are really trying to feel you out and trying to feel how tough you are or if you can actually accomplish what you're setting out to do, as well as definitely in employment with peers as well as your boss. So of course, we always want to ask for feedback. This is extremely important because you don't know if you might have more growing to do or more work to do, and or if you just don't have any at all and you're learning that you can only give but so much to a certain individual. But asking for feedback is important because it demonstrates to others that you are committed to improving your skills and contributing to your team, taking the initiative to get better at essential aspects of your work shows that you have the dedication and drive to succeed. Can anybody tell me one of the number one areas in which people don't want feedback professionally? Nobody wants to take a stab. Elijah, what do you think?
I would probably say how they do their work.
No.
Oh,
No. Who else is on here?
Say something.
Sure.
Is it like their personal life?
No, professionally. Professionally, what is one of the number one situations where people don't want feedback professionally?
Oh, like well, me personally, like a ranking thing. Like if you're not my superior.
No.
Wait, is it like their mistakes or stuff that like they failed on?
It could be, but it's one situation that most professionals have to do, and if they get it or not, they don't ask for feedback.
Oh,
A
is it
performance review?
constructive?
The interview. There's a lot of people that don't want to look back in the sense of either it's painful that they didn't get the job, either they're embarrassed, either they already thought so horribly about themselves that they wasn't going to get the job. And so why should I actually ask for feedback? But that's usually one of the number one places. Then I also have a friend, she gave me this advice, but I've never done it. Where she actually gets interviewed and then she will, if she doesn't get the job, she'll follow the person that did get the job. So she'll like read their credentials. She'll try to find out why they outmeasured her. And I think that that's not healthy, because that can turn around and bite you. Because even if she or he measures more than you, there's always serendipity and there's always something that, since the interviews are subjective anyway, somebody can have intuition about you and say, you know what, we have candidates that have been in the field 10 years more than you. We have candidates that are way more qualified, but it's just something about you. And I need to have you on my team. So that's why I don't really follow that one. But making sure, especially in any type of interview process, whether, and sometimes you can even ask later on if when you are successful. I can't remember why mine came up with Dr. Berchesky, but he just told me the truth. He just said, well, when you left the room, all of us just looked at each other crazy and took a deep breath. Like, what was that? And so those things also help you because they also help you try to figure out where in which you still need to grow. So, of course, helps you to improve your performance, develops open, transparent dialogue, may improve chances of getting promoted, improves your ability to fix mistakes quickly, provides an opportunity to learn from colleagues. How to ask for feedback. Find an appropriate time to ask. Nothing worse than being in a meeting and then somebody bringing up something to where everybody looks like, okay, are they in the same room? Can they read the room? Where's that emotional intelligence? So definitely find an appropriate time to ask, or you can even schedule a time to meet. Prepare questions to ask. There's nothing worse of actually being in the moment and then trying to remember all that you had thought about, but then you're in your nerves. And so then you walk away and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask X, Y, and Z. So always have your questions prepared to ask. Also, what's the rule of thumb when you are in an interview? How many questions? Should you have questions at the end of the interview? And if so, how many?
Isn't it like 3?
Yes, 3. Is that cadence? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually 3. So I always say I always pick out 1 to 5 because you'll be surprised just in having the conversations that you should be having in an interview. Some of your questions might actually be answered. So it's nothing worse than asking a question that you contributed good conversation to. So that's why I say up to 5. Learn how to improve from the feedback. There's nothing worse than getting feedback and still doing the same thing. What do they say? Doing the same thing wrong over and over equates to the definition of insanity. So you don't want to do that. Of course, definitely thanking by saying thank you. And then also ask for feedback regularly. That way, you know if you are outgrowing an organization and or also in a position. Know your audience. Different stakeholders may have different concerns. The tactics you use to influence one group might not be the best approach for the next. Tailor your influencing strategy for the particular person and consider their personality, goals, and objectives, as well as their roles and responsibility. So, for example, someone is highly rational, may be more easily swayed by a logical appeal than an emotional one. And so tactics might include organizational intelligence, team promotion, trust building, leveraging actual networks. Oh, thought that there was one more. And so a lot of times people don't take this extremely important, and I know why they don't. So I do consulting work on the side when it comes to professional development. And I had actually a colleague that came to me, and she's starting out. She wants to deal with like women empowerment. On top of that, she had an opportunity to get paid at a certain conference, and so we went through and we created her whole workshop. And then when the next workshop came, I was just like, okay, so what are you going to do? Are you going to add on? Are you going to, it might not be your same audience, but you can use portions of your topic. And she just never brought it up again, and neither did I. Because yeah, one something doesn't generally fit everything. I had to learn that from going into high schools to recruit students, to speaking at conferences, whether there were students or not, to then also having an audience in the classroom, but then also having an audience in the sense of if I was going to be working in the capacity of student engagement, then also having a different dialogue if I'm working with graduate schools or industry. And so what I'm getting at is that the sooner that you start that, the better that you will be, because it's going to happen to you regardless. Communication nearly always involves two or more individuals. Therefore, listening is just as important as speaking when it comes to communicating successfully, but listening can be more challenging than we realize. In her blog post, Mastering the Basics of communication expert Marjorie North notes that we only hear about half of what the other person says during any given conversation. The goal of active listening is to ensure that you hear not just the words, but also what the person is saying in the entire message. Some tips for active listening include giving the speaker your full and undivided attention, clearing your mind of distractions, judgments, and counter arguments, avoiding the temptation to interrupt your thoughts, showing open, positive body language to keep your mind focused, to show the speaker that you are listening, rephrase or paraphrase what you've heard when making your reply, and then also ask open-ended questions designed to elicit additional information. But these open-ended questions give that individual also a time to expound on the topic or what they have to say in a form that it feels like it's equally yoked or it's mutually beneficial that you both are having a conversation. One of the things I've always spoke at length, and for me, I had to learn how to cue into somebody's body language, the faces they might be giving me. If I am setting something up and giving them the background for a reason, if I start saying like this and stuff that they don't even realize that they're doing, because if they knew it, they would be like, oh snap. If somebody did that to me, I'd be pissed, right? So, but what I learned to do was to start making everything else that I talk to them about directly to the point, concise, and yeah, move from there. Observe nonverbal cues. Being able to communicate even before saying a word is important skill to master. Nonverbal communication refers to your facial expression, eye contact, tone of voice, gestures, and posture. And they are all ways you can communicate without even saying a word. Communicating effectively through nonverbal means being careful about your body language the same way you choose your words carefully. For example, a crossed arm may seem defensive, constant eye contact may seem threatening, and a straight face may seem distant or arrogant. And yeah, these nonverbal signals can affect the effectiveness of your communication without intending to do it. in the same way smiling and nodding and affirmation can affect it positively. Therefore, learn how to be conscious of your nonverbal communications. And I think that that's something that can be hard to do. But I think that if you're doing it as time goes on, that is definitely manageable, even if you don't like the individual. Now, what did I do with, and I saved it right here. So I wonder why it's not here. I'm looking for the link. And what I'll do is, yeah, that's weird. Are there any questions for me or about the topic that you might have before we adjourn?
There was one in the chat.
Oh, and they put, no, oh, can you give any advice on how to call someone out for gaslighting in a manner that de-escalates the situation? De-escalates or, okay, it's because you want to bring it down. I think that the most effective thing I heard somebody say the other day, a gentleman, it was on like I'm not on TikTok, but it was like one of those shorts. And he said, the best argument is one in which you always, no, the argument that is always won is one in which, is one in which the individual walks away. Right? Because if somebody's gaslighting you already, they're already insulting your intelligence. They might come from a place of being narcissistic anyway, so they might not even learn what jewel you can give them. But one of the other things that they say is, like Miss Darden said, as far as like is really, if somebody's going to gaslight you, clearly they're not in the same reality, in the sense of if they're going to try to insult your intelligence. So you have to do a lot of well, I feel this way about this situation. And from the way that, and this is another one, you have to do and another one can be, well, from what I perceive and from what I saw, X, Y, and Z, right? I have an individual that's around me right now and they will gaslight me or they will try to make me feel in the sense of like, oh, well, I might not know my role. But the moment that I start to mention facts and witnesses, then they back up, like as if nothing ever happened, like I didn't just try to play you. So I'm trying to say, in instances like gaslighting, if you're going to make sure that you're bringing them into the same reality as you, and if it feels like it's too much of a tug, and you just being able to walk away, one of those two is going to work. Either one is going to work because you've actually said what your feelings are, or the other one's going to work because you're walking away and now they're talking to themselves and wondering, okay, well, where was my disconnect if they just turned it all the way off?